Next, we want to talk about empowering consumers. And what is that value proposition to consumers? And I believe, being a marketing and a communications person, that we need to talk about the smart grid in ways that our children and our parents and grandparents would understand clearly. And I don't know that we do that enough. And so last week, a bunch of us Itron folks were in Houston, and we have an executive forum where we bring some of the utilities together that are deploying our technology: Southern California Edison, San Diego, CenterPoint, and they give us their feedback on what they want us to do, what they want us to build, what problems and things they want us to solve, and it's a great discussion. But we had a woman in there from Knoxville, Tennessee, named Suzanne Shelton. And she runs a group called the Shelton Group. Some of you may be aware of that. And she specializes in marketing and communication of sustainable programs for utilities and insulation companies and all these types of green companies. And she's done some pretty interesting segmentation work among consumers. And I took some good notes there, but interestingly enough, she sees 4 primary segments in the consumer base when it comes to smart grid. First of all, and they're all roughly equal, they're nearly the same size portions. There's about 22% who are true believers, very green. We don't need to convince them. They are going to do the right thing and whatever they can to save the planet, and they're very committed to these types of technologies and programs. There is the largest group that she identified, she called cautious conservatives. And those tend to be, generally speaking, males, a little bit older, and they're not driven by a green message. They are driven by a message that they can be in control. They can put some PV on their roof. They can have some distributed generation. If they have a smart thermostat, they can participate in programs and make decisions that put them in control of their power consumption and cost. And that's the value proposition to them. Another quarter of them is concerned moms, as she described them, and mostly women who are raising children, and they'll do the right thing if it's convenient for them and it's consistent with what their role there. And then there's about another quarter that are sort of working class realists that are maybe not very motivated to participate in programs and technologies, and somewhat constrained by socioeconomic status and maybe not as deep a penetration as some of the enabling technologies involved. But the whole idea is that there's this fairly complex strata of consumer attitudes out there for which the sort of simple messages will not do the job by themselves. She made this point that there needs to be combinations of logical, rational, and emotional messaging about what are the drivers behind moving to a smarter grid, and those differ for a lot of people. And so we asked her, Suzanne, is there one message, is there one home-based message at the top of the pyramid that resonates universally across all customer segments regarding the smart grid and the need for these investments and the justification for this change? And she said it was control. It's not that the bill is going to be more accurate or the grid's going to be more efficient or the utility will reduce its costs. It's you will be in a greater degree of control of your energy usage. And that's the one proposition that seems to resonate in all segments. And that was a bit of an eye-opener. So interesting stuff there. Sort of close behind that in terms of universal messages was the desire not to waste anything. And mind you, I'm not using the phrase conserve because sometimes that comes with a little baggage with it, but let's not waste stuff. And that really resonates across all the segments. And of course, as we've talked about already, the ability to integrate more clean energy resources into the grid is just a key driver behind smart grid. We know the sun doesn't shine everywhere. We know the wind doesn't blow all the time. And how do we mitigate that intermittency with demand response programs, with distributed storage, those sorts of technologies? Now, one of our biggest concerns there is what's going on associated with the deployment of some of the smart metering systems across the country. I know many of you are very familiar with it, and the utilities in California. We're seeing more of it in Texas and other states, and there's a lot of backlash and concern about smart meter deployments. And and there's all kinds of claims. You know, the typical core issues that the public raises is RF emissions. Are they harmful to people's health? Data privacy, or is Big Brother watching? Is this a pretext for the government to control energy usage? Meter accuracy and billing, and so at Itron, I probably speak for some of the other companies in the industry who deliver these systems. We spend a lot of time helping our utility customers come up with good answers to these questions. And you know, we at Itron, we sort of dealt with these questions on and off for 20, 25 years, ever since, you know, automated meter reading systems came into being. And the answers are there. The data is there. It's very clear that these new meters are very accurate, more accurate than the old electromechanical meters. It's very clear that the RF emissions of these meters fall well below the thresholds, safety thresholds from the FCC and so forth. And it's very clear that they deliver benefit, but as Suzanne, my speaker at our conference, said last week, you can't necessarily counter an emotional argument with a rational one. You need to counter with both rational and emotional. So anyway, as a result of all this, I think there's a real challenge and some risks that smart grid credibility, particularly how it touches the consumer, is on the line out there. We've seen municipalities, county commissions, city councils in California pass moratoriums on smart meter installation. We saw the meter accuracy issues crop up in Texas. We saw in Connecticut a few days ago where the Attorney General went very public in declaring that he didn't think that the costs of smart metering were worth the benefits. And so there's a lot of concern out there. And this really just reinforces the need to develop this value proposition to quantify these costs and benefits and communicate it more clearly. Because I think smart meters are foundational to the smart grid in terms of communication, measurement, control, connection to the consumer. And big investments are being made. And certainly it suggests that a lot of these concerns that have been raised recently are a very strong, vocal minority. And the sort of new twist on the issue that we're running into is that there's a number of people out there concerned about RF emissions who choose not to have any RF in their lives. They don't have cell phones, garage door openers, you know, routers in their home and so forth. And you know, to people who use cell phones, you can make the argument this is tiny compared to that in terms of the duty cycles, the emissions, and so forth. But to someone who chooses not to have that in their lives or believes that it has ill health effects on them, they come back and say, well, you're not giving me a choice with a smart meter. And so that's causing some concern with some of these deployments, because then what do you do? Do you provide an opt-out option that involves a wired technology of some sort? And does that get to a point where that undermines the effectiveness of the deployment, the network and so forth? Do you put a charge on a manual meter reading out there and say for 20, 25 bucks or 15 or whatever the utility might decide is fair? Do you want to go that route? So I think the evidence is there that the RF emissions is not a health issue based on the standards. It's pretty clear. And one of the points that we really came to at our conference last week was we need to, as an industry, our utility customers, us and so forth, build a community of advocates, of business leaders, perhaps among those cautious conservatives who see the benefits of energy management for their business and their bottom line, and talk in both an emotional and rational way about the case for smart grid, the drivers behind it, and why things do in fact need to change. And as we're aware, the regulatory and business models aren't exactly aligned with smart grid success yet. There's a lot of sausage making going on. It goes on here. It's going to go on for a while. It won't be pretty to watch, but how do we make sure a utility is compensated for a negawatt, something they saved? Or how does a utility earn a return on an asset that they avoided having to invest in because they had better decision support and data to work with? Those are still key questions we're working out. And also I want to talk about just the need to see the forests for the trees, or the forest, not just the trees. And I know those aren't trees there. That's actually a photo of San Diego. But I would say today with a degree of humility that the smart grid is bigger than any one company. It's bigger than any one technology. It's not only technical, but it's behavioral, it's cultural. And I might even make the argument that though the technical challenges are daunting, the behavioral and the social challenges for utilities in terms of program development and engagement and incentives and things like that may be even more challenging. You know, unless we design these programs right, price differentials, positive and negative reinforcement, how motivated will a consumer be to adjust thermostats and take actions if it's plus or minus $10 a month on their bill? But from what we're seeing in the Middle East, the prices of gasoline costs are going to continue to climb. And as the last panel pointed out, there's a number of challenges out there that are keeping us awake at night, and they certainly need to. So in terms of closing here and finishing up, and if nothing else, keeping us on schedule here for the afternoon, I think there's a couple of key industry priorities that at least we at Itron and the other technology providers in the industry bear in the front of their minds, and that we really need to focus on. First of all, I mentioned that AMI, smart metering, is often the most, initial first resident tenant under a network and the first application the utility looks at and deploys. That is certainly true, and that provides substantial justification for the investment. But as we move forward in this industry, we need to evolve these networks into multi-application networks that are based on open standards that bring with them optimized cost of ownership, standardized security and network management tools so that the cost of these systems goes down. Simply to unleash the innovation potential in this industry, to streamline costs and really achieve at least a good share of those promised smart grid benefits, we've got to evolve these systems from a combination of proprietary protocols and open standards to open standards all the way. One of the things we're doing at Itron right now is partnering with Cisco to develop a fairly definitive IPv6 architecture for a multi-application network that's not an exclusive partnership with Itron and Cisco. Our intention is to make that readily available to the industry, but that's just an example of sort of the migration, the evolution that needs to take place in these technologies and architectures to really justify that investment and make sure that a utility can run multiple applications over a common enterprise class network infrastructure rather than a fairly closed AMI head end or whatever the case may be. Next, we've got to continually work to reduce the cost of ownership of these systems. And the business case, and as we've seen some things unfold in some different states, some opposition, some regulatory hesitancy and skepticism about the costs, is not bulletproof. And if you're a utility who not too long ago put in a metering system of some sort that might not be off the books yet, you sort of lose that business case benefit from the saved labor and so forth, and that's not an insignificant chunk of the business case. So these costs need to come down. We need to build these systems more efficiently and reliably. We need to reduce our manufacturing costs in terms of the technology providers. And related to the first point, we really need to evolve toward open standards so that we're not incurring the difficulties, the integration costs, all those things that come with separate networks. We need to bring this together at the architectural level. Most importantly, as I've been talking all along here, we need to demonstrate consumer value, and we need to share those successes as they come about. Again, I think there's a lot of skepticism out there, but these systems are delivering value. We need to get to a point where they're deployed and we're engaging consumers in new and innovative ways, and then we need to share those stories because there is a great story there, and it's sort of being drowned out currently by some of the concerns. But this needs to be explained and communicated to the public in very compelling, very clear terms. And I can't overstate the need for that. It needs to be real simple. And we need to make our stakeholders successful, and for the technology providers, that means helping our utility clients, deliver on all their use cases, on all their anticipated business case benefits, and we're doing that. We're doing that right now in terms of those business cases that led to these investments in California and Texas and so forth, and now we see new value beyond that we want to get to that involves consumer engagement and so forth. This summer, Southern California Edison will begin mass market dynamic rates in California, which the AMI system will be central to that. In Texas, they're in the midst of moving more toward hand technologies in the home and enabling the energy retail providers to provide those sorts of services. And so there's a whole new frontier ahead of us in terms of engaging consumers that we need to deliver and demonstrate and then communicate that value. And lastly, we need to manage risk and avoid stranded assets, and that's sort of captured in some of the earlier points there, but let's be honest, these big projects in the current regulatory climate and the current financial climate are not risk-free. There's technical risks, there's economic risk, there's project risk, regulatory risk, and we need solutions that will deliver good, strong value today in the near term, but also provide a pathway and an architecture to get to the future when we are bringing more renewables onto the grid, when electric vehicle penetration increases, so we can put in a smart charging program to meet consumer needs, but also maintain the integrity of the distribution system. These are big challenges that are coming down the road. And what we really need to do is make sure we're putting in place a foundation that can migrate to the future and accommodate and support new applications as they come. So these are some of the challenges that we're facing and working with. I didn't want to get up here and say everything's magic and everything's just flowing smoothly. It's not. I think for those of us in the room, and I think it's a significant chunk of us, we recognize the challenges. We recognize that new technologies are a big part of the solution, and so we work together to really transform an industry and make sure that that we continue to provide a reliable and efficient supply of power, and that we do so while taking care of our planet. And these are the big themes that we need to communicate. So with that, I will close. I will keep us on schedule. And again, Itron is proud to present or to sponsor the EnergyBiz Leadership Forum, and I appreciate you taking a few minutes to let me talk today. Thank you.